Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. And remember, if you find yourself sitting on a comma in your life, you can also talk to me without a microphone. To explore coaching with me and getting off the comma in your own life, check out my information and book a call with me at offthecomma.com. And I'm also doing something different. I'm curating my own sponsor community, local businesses and professionals who I handpick and who align with our vision here. Be sure to check them out, learn more about them on my website and my YouTube channel. In the meantime, let's get into this week's conversation. And we are back again. Our storytelling community here just continues to grow, and episode after episode, we continue to learn more about our fellow humans and what it's like to be human and what it's like to experience different things. And this week will be no exception. I'm excited to be back again. It's crazy to think that we're in January of 2025. Whoever thought that we would get here at this point? And so very excited because this week's guest is another person who Jaime and I have not met before. And so I always love this because I actually like meeting people for the first time in the context and in the congress of our conversations, because I get to learn about them in such a deeper way than your typical like networking mixer or so forth. What do you do for a living? So we get acquainted very, very deeply, very, very quickly. So I've got Jaime Raygoza with us this week, and Dr. Jaime, actually, although we're going to use first names today. And I'm going to shut up and quit rambling. I'm going to hand it over to you, Jaime. Let's get to know you first before we get into your story. Why don't you start by telling us, how would you like to be known? And then what would you like us to know about you?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Jaime Raygoza. One of the things that people have been talking about me more often is I'm a runner. So I like to do short distance, long distance. Back in October of 2024, I ran my first marathon. So that was very exciting. It was a goal that I decided at the early on in 2024. You know what? Let me just do it. I want to see how far I can push my brain, how far can I push my body, and see if this is something that is achievable. So I proved myself wrong, and I told myself I wasn't going to be able to do it. And then I finally did it.
Congratulations, by the way. I mean, that is such a huge achievement. I was a runner for many years, and I only dabble a little bit now and then. So I'm already kind of drawn to you for that shared thing, and very much in awe and appreciation of your achievement with the marathon. Continue. I'm sorry. I just had to jump in.
No, of course. That's just one of the things I told myself, let me try to really do it. I was never really a runner growing up. I would finish a mile in 30 minutes. So not being able to run a block at a time. And now I'm able to do miles at a time, which was a big accomplishment. But overall, other things that I do, I like to practice archery when I'm bored. I try to dabble and learn new skills whenever I can. I am a proud cat dad. So I do have my little one of 2 years that likes to roam around with the zoomies every day.
Nice.
Yeah. So her name is Jolene, as the song.
Cool.
But for a career, I work as a stress and career coach. So I help people manage their stressors and find out what are some things that are disrupting the work-life balance and helping bridge that gap.
Cool. Jaime, you've shared quite a bit about us, and we can certainly make assumptions and kind of inferences based on some of the things that you've told us so far. How would you describe yourself to someone kind of as a human being? What adjectives would you use to describe yourself as?
Yeah. So I'm a pretty ambitious, audacious, and bubbly person. Ooh. The reason I choose those adjectives is because I do have ADHD. And as people who know people with ADHD, we tend to see something and we're like, I can do that too. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so we love the challenge, and I always come at everything with a positive, bubbly personality. I really try to hype other people around me as well as myself. And it's very audacious because sometimes I get into things and I'm like, I should have probably not got myself into this, but I'm already knees deep in the water. Might as well just jump in.
I love it. And certainly I'll jump in through our conversation, sometimes with serious reflections and so forth, and always correct me if I'm off base or going in the wrong direction. But like, there's something about that. Like, there's the I should or shouldn't, but the willingness to just dive in and experiment. And it reminds me of a Cher CD. First of all, aging
Mhm.
myself, right, from a couple of decades ago. And I just remember it was like a live CD, and she was at a concert, and she was talking about something about just like, whatever it is you're not supposed to do, just do it anyway. You can always apologize for it later or something like that. So,
Mhm.
but the acknowledging the experimentation of it all, right, and the willingness to just kind of dive in. Very cool. All right. Well, Jaime, I'd love to get into your story here, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot more about you as a person and the things that you like and enjoy and that you face in your world through your story. In a minute, we'll get into the questions. One of the things I like to do with every guest before we get started is, as you think ahead to the conversation we're going to have the next 40-45 minutes or so, as you tell your story, what intention would you have for yourself in the telling of the story?
Um, that's a good question. So, what intention would I like for myself? I guess to be clear, not
Mm.
over. I tend to speed up things,
Mm.
a lot. So just be clear, be cool, and take my time.
Okay. All right. I see your intention, and my intention is to support you in that intention by obviously creating a space here for you to be able to tell your story. And as with all guests, and the whole point of this podcast is that there will be someone or someone's out there who hear your story and they see themselves in you and your story,
Mm,
and that makes them feel a little bit more connected, a little bit less alone. And in the best of cases, they'll even feel inspired and empowered to do something maybe that they've been wanting to do, either secretly or not so secretly.
yeah, and that's ultimately what I like to. Why even come on podcasts and share my story? Just because I really do want to show people that anything's possible, and that no matter where you are in life, you can always do something about it. You do have more control over your circumstances than you think.
Hmm. I'm so like glad you said that here, because I was wanting earlier to acknowledge something else about you when you were describing yourself as bubbly and positive and like to hype other people up. What a great place for you to be as a career coach, right? And how lucky for the people that you coach with that is who you are. So here you are saying that that's very much a big part of who you are, wanting folks to see that anything is possible. Very cool. Okay.
Thanks.
Let's get into your story. 5 questions will frame the conversation, as with every episode. And so let's start with the first question. Jaime, where in your life have you found yourself sitting on a comma?
Where in my life have I not seen myself sitting in a comma? I feel that we're constantly growing, and the more we learn, the more we start to question who are we as a person. And I do feel that we have different stages where we have that comma, or even like a semicolon, like a very long pause that you're like,
Mhm.
what the heck is going on? Everything I knew is now gone. How do I continue from this point? Um, the biggest one that I would have to say was when I was in my early to mid 20s. I was roughly 24, 25. And some people call it a quarter life crisis.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, I was in the middle of my master's degree. I was working full time in a Parks and Rec as a supervisor department in Palm Springs. And I was also interning with a nonprofit for HIV and AIDS advocacy. I was putting in anywhere from 70 to 80 hours worth of work slash intern hours a week. Um, I was getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep on a good day.
Mm.
And I was just burning myself out so much because I thought this is what I have to do to succeed.
Mm.
I was taught at a young age as a Mexican American child of immigrants. I was taught that the only way you're going to succeed in life is by working until your body can no longer handle it. The only reason you're resting is because you're sick. Those are the words of my dad. And even then, you're not really sick enough if you can still breathe and move. So you have to keep working, which nowadays I totally disagree with that. We can go on a whole different conversation with that. But I kept going. And what really happened is that I started doubting what I was doing. The passions why was I doing my master's program? Nothing, just everything seemed like it was for nothing. Like I was just like, I don't see where this is actually going. Like I'm not progressing in my career. I'm doing this because people tell me you're good at it. So this is why I continue doing that. And I just felt very unmotivated. And a lot of that was the stress of the school. A lot of that was the lack of sleep. And also I wasn't really in a very positive work environment, both in my internship and my regular work. My leaders were not really inspiring. They weren't really teaching me. They were like, you just clock in, get a paycheck, leave, So it was one night and I was driving from my internship, my schooling, which I used to go 2 times a week from like 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then I would drive from Riverside to Palm Springs. For those that are not familiar with Southern California, there's a very long, windy freeway it's like a road that goes through the mountains from Riverside to Palm Springs. It's about an hour and a half. It was 11 o'clock at night. I was going on maybe 2 hours of sleep that day. And I was just extremely tired. I noticed that even before I got on the freeway, I started dozing on the wheel. And I was like, this is very scary. Like, what the heck is going on? So I stopped by like a local coffee shop that was open, grabbed a large with like 6 shots of espresso, chugged it. And I was like, let's go. I made it through a majority of the road. And as soon as I like passed the exit of the freeway, the next thing I just felt my body go numb and I knocked out. Next couple scenes was me waking up. I felt a crash. I knocked out, woke up again. I was midair, turning, spinning, knocked out again. And then I woke up when I felt the car hit the ground and started spinning again, which ended up causing me to hit the rear mirror. And I knocked out. I just kept trying to wake up, forcing myself to wake up. I saw flashing night lights. I heard the ambulance, somebody yelling at me from the mirror. I felt somebody like breaking the mirror, and then I just knocked out. Next thing I woke up, I was in the hospital. All my clothes were gone. Wearing the gown. A nurse like rushed in as soon as she saw me, saying the John Doe woke up. And I was like, what the heck? And doctors, police officers, nurses came in trying to ask me a bunch of questions. I was getting so overstimulated, and I just started crying. I was like, I don't know what's going on. So the doctor like had everybody out. They just said, okay, so you've been knocked out for about 4 days now. I was just, they're like, we couldn't find anything in the crash. Your car was like dismantled. You were just basically with your seatbelt upside down with half of your car pretty much like in pieces. It was difficult to get you out. We got you out and you've just been unconscious since then. Luckily, no internal bodily harm. You barely left with a scratch. Like you're very like blessed to be alive. Like statistically, you shouldn't be alive, but you are. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And what happened is that I crashed into a large light post, which actually knocked it down, guillotined my car, which had me go into the air, and I ended up crashing into other cars, into other like things. Luckily, nobody else was hurt. Nobody else was on the road because it was so late at night. But it was in front of a nightclub, so it caused a lot of commotion. So everybody in the nightclub came out trying to help. And it just caused a lot of attention. You can probably find like some news article on it. The police officers thought that I was drunk, so that's why they were there to like talk, but everything was clear. I was just tired. But that's when like I just kind of woke up. I was just like, there's no point in me killing myself to this point because I could have died and all of that would have been worth nothing. I ended up calling my boss the next day. I called my family. They all came. Because nobody knew. I lived 2 hours away, like closest family member was 3 hours away. So
Yeah.
when I told them, everybody rushed over and they were comforting me. I ended up calling my boss and my internship and let them know what happened. My boss had already fired me because she said that I was no show for job for 3 days. And since they called me and left messages that I didn't answer, they assumed that I gave up on the job and they were already recruiting for my replacement. I told them, well, now that you know
Mm.
what happened, like, can you like give my job back? And she's like, no. She's like, we don't want someone
Wow.
who just AWOLs like that. And I was like, you understand that it wasn't because of my intention. She's like, well, you should have planned better. So it was like no consideration, no anything.
Wow. And clearly, I mean, you already had intuited that this wasn't the right place for you anyway. I mean, even though pardon me for self-referencing, but even though that was pretty
Mm-hmm.
shitty, it was reinforcement for sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. And I had a similar situation with my
Wow.
internship too. They were just like, we really needed you. There was a fundraiser that weekend and you weren't there. Like everything fell on your shoulders and you just let us down. Instead of saying like, we're so sorry that this happened to you, like take your time, heal.
Hmm.
You probably have some trauma to, you know, overcome. No, they didn't care. So that was like a big life. Like I was like,
Mm.
no, I can't do this. I quit both of those jobs. Well, one I was fired. The other one, they were like on eggshells and I ended up quitting the internship and then um, moved back with my mom and I just restarted from the bottom up.
Mm.
I couldn't get back on the wheel for like about 3 months because I kept having like PTSD every time I just stepped in the car. I needed therapy to kind of help me
Mm.
walk through that. And I did a little bit of PT just because like I was so shooken up, you know? But it was like a rough start. I had to let go of everything that I had and start back. I
Mm.
didn't end up getting a full-time job until like a year and a half later. So it was just a very humbling experience just because I had to give up everything and start all over.
Yeah, I hear so much that you've shared. First of all, thank you for sharing all this, and what you were already kind of stretching yourself. I'm just going to kind of reflect for a little bit, if that's okay, and
Yeah, of
correct
course.
me where I'm wrong, of course. But like you're already stretching yourself and stretching yourself and stretching yourself, and physically, mentally, emotionally, and also stretching the meaning and purpose of it as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you said, and then stretch yourself to the point of such fatigue that now this has happened, sort of like we can go, 1,000 different directions with your story, and one of them is, the universe is like, okay, time to rethink, right? And boy, what a way to be sort of called into a reframe or a redirect or a course change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jaime, let me ask the second question. Go back and forth as much as you want to, but this will kind of open up some additional kind of ways to look at it and think about it. So as you look back at this comma, I'm sure there's lots more to share, but this comma that you were sitting on with this whole scenario and situation, what did it create for you?
Create a lot of things. So one of the things that people don't usually talk
Mm.
about is the anxiety, the fear, you know, the the feeling of being lost and not knowing where to go
Mm.
before the accident and even after the accident. Because like those feelings didn't suddenly disappear or like made me like do things. They amplified. They got so much stronger after the accident. And it just like you
Mm.
said, it like reinforced what I was feeling. It really convinced me that yeah, I really needed a change. But
Mm.
change is so scary. And it is something that we're creatures of habit. We love our routines. We love going every morning to go get our coffee, going and doing those cooler chats with our coworkers, and then, doing everything that you do on a daily basis because it feels comforting. It feels normal. It feels like you have like this safety blanket over you. But whenever you have to change, whether it be your position, you have to make a big move, you get a better job offer somewhere else, whatever it may be, it's like you have to reconnect with yourself and ask yourself, who am I now? And I think some of
Mm.
us, that's very scary because we don't know who we are to begin with.
Say more about that as it relates to you and your experience, because that's really profound right there. Like, we don't know who we are to begin with. What's that mean for you? How does that unfold, or how did it unfold for you?
So back then, I didn't really know who I was because I was molding myself to be a version of who my father and my mother wanted. I was being a person that was people pleasing everybody but myself. I never really took time to really ask myself, what does Jaime want? What does Jaime crave? What does Jaime aspire to be? It was always, how can I be the best version of myself so everybody else stays proud of me? So I can continue being a role model. A little bit backstory about my family. My parents grew up both in a large family. My mom had 7 siblings. My dad had 7 siblings. Um, each of their brothers and sisters had like at least minimum 3 kids. So very, very large family. Out of everybody, only 2 of us actually went to college, me being the one. And going into a master's degree, that was like unheard of. And my family was kind of idolized by the rest of the family because my nuclear family, because we were the ones that did things differently. We were the ones that were like, we want to be like them when we grow up type of thing. Mm-hmm. A lot of my nephews, my cousins, my aunts and uncles would always put me in this pedestal of like, we all want to be like Jaime. They would compare their kids and be like, you should be more like your cousin. You should be more like your brother. You should be more like this. And it's a lot of pressure to be considered perfect. So I felt like I had to be perfect. And my definition of perfect was be what they want me to be, not what I want to be. I never took the time to really get to know me and who I was, but I just knew that the discomfort inside me didn't mesh well with this idea of perfection.
It's, I think so many people can relate to this. And yet, looking at your story, it seems as though like all of that kind of drive before the accident, right? The drive, the pushing, like you said, all these different roles, all the different hours that it required, all the work, the driving between the places and everything. Now it seems like that adds a little bit more kind of color and shade to it, doesn't it? Like, not only was it just expected, because I mean, let's be honest, in this country, in this day and age, that's kind of what you have to do in order to pay your bills. But then there's the family dynamic, the family expectations. And not only is there the family expectations, but then you've been placed in a particular role. Some might even say on a pedestal. So now there's the elevated expectations. It's not even keeping up with the family's expectations. It's keeping up with the family's expectations that I will be better than the family. Mm-hmm. That's a gross simplification of it, but I'll turn it back over to you. Like, how does that land, or where would you take that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's not only like even family, but I had colleagues and coworkers, as well as like even friends, have that same mentality, just because I would go above and beyond in everything that I did. And I didn't get my ADHD diagnosis until I was 29. So it was late in the game. So back then I just thought that I just had this weird drive to do things, and people didn't understand that. So they're like, how is it that he knows so much about so many random things, and he can learn things in a fast pace, and he can able to do all this stuff? But they would see the side of me when I was being productive, but they would never see the side of the ADHD when I would hyperfixate on nothing, hyperfixate on my thoughts, on my depressions, on my anxieties, all the internal turmoil that I had inside me. And people would still be like I remember I had bosses that were like, why can't y'all be more like Jaime? If we had more Jaimes in our workforce, like that would be great. It's like you really don't know what you're asking for, and at the same time, your self-worth is low because you don't know how to acknowledge yourself, because like, once again, you don't know who you are. You're just doing these things because it feels right. That's what you've been taught that is right, but there's no moral, ethical standards behind it. You're like, it's not what you truly feel. It's just what you've been taught to do. And it wasn't until like after the accident and later on that I really like started taking myself out, learning to do that internal work, getting to see who I was, that I understood, oh, I do this because of this. I do that because of that. And like, I actually do like to do this part of my life. No, I don't. I should take this out. And then really trying to put the pieces together to reassemble the version of yourself that you actually know and love.
I want to take that a step further because, you started by introducing yourself as someone who likes to prove I can do it. And then now you've been kind of telling us about, living up to the expectations of others without knowing who I am. I'm assuming that as a result of the accident, you really just kind of alluded to this. It's like, then you started to really explore what matters to you. So tell us a little bit about what's the distinction between the expectations that others had and the expectations that you now have of yourself.
Yeah. So I think a good chunk of the things that I used to do, I still do, but with different intentions and different perceptions. And I think perception is the biggest key in all of this, is like, how do you perceive things based on what you know about yourself and what you know about the circumstances? So, good example. Would I probably have run the marathon if it wasn't because I wanted to do that and prove that to myself? Maybe not. Maybe that's not something I would have done unless, let's say, that my parents or my friends said, we think that this would be really good for you to do it. I don't think I would have probably still finished, but I wouldn't have the same level of satisfaction. I wouldn't have the same level of drive, and I would probably hate every single minute of it. Versus the training part was one of my favorite things to do because I was learning things about it. I did not like every single aspect of it. Any runner will tell you that the hardest thing and the thing that they hate the most about running is running.
Right.
The concept of running is great, but the actual running part is the thing that sucks. Because it never gets easier. Like, it's just like your body does get stronger. You do get better muscles and like learning how to breathe. But there's, depending on the weather, depending on the day, like the lack of the level of sleep, it could feel like you haven't trained at all. So it's like your body is not always at the consistent basis. So it's always like, what kind of version am I going to get today? But
so true.
I learned that, like, oh, wow, I'm so proud of myself because I did this. I'm proud of myself because I did that. I can't believe I accomplished this. Versus before, the perspective was, are my friends proud of me for doing this? Are my parents proud of me for doing this? What do they think? And I would share these goals and these little accomplishments with my friends and family, but this is not something that they were interested in. So I didn't get that external validation from them. And back then, that would have been the reason I gave up, because they were like, well, they're not really liking this. So why am I doing this? Let me pivot and do something else. But that was not the case now, because I was like, I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this for me. And the more I got excited about it, the more they got excited about it. But it wasn't like, and they never thought that this would be something that they would get excited about, but because they saw so much passion and enthusiasm from it, over time, I won them over. Not that they're doing it, but they were like understanding it. And I was changing their perspective of what running is and why people do it and the drive behind it. And I exposed them to things that they would have never seen because of it, like the big races, the big cheering, like, all of the stuff. And that's what I mean by getting to know you. If you're willing to do something for you, even when things around you are not, like, people around you are not really supporting you, that's how you know you truly found yourself, because you're willing to do it, even though no one else is going to be backing you up.
I'd love to dive in on this a little bit, because this feels like one of those points that people can listen to your story and the things that you share and they kind of make assumptions. It's like, yeah, I get that. I've heard that before and everything. I always there's always a point somewhere in the podcast where it's like, wait a minute, let's go one level deeper, because this is something that will really shed light on things for folks who might not otherwise slow down enough to pay attention. First of all, an acknowledgement here that you can do the same things. You told us you can do the same things and you can accomplish the same thing, but it's the experience of doing them that changes dramatically. Both the experience of doing them, the way you think and feel about it, so mindset, right? And also what you draw from the experience. So I just I didn't have an agenda there other than just I really want to kind of bold and underline that you called out. It's like, it's not a matter of doing different things. Rather, for you, it's not necessarily just a matter of doing different things. It's about doing the same things differently sometimes, right? We're kind of generalizing here. And then this other thing that you just finished describing to us is so really kind of profound, because I've experienced it in my own life and I've heard other people talk about this thing, which is this element of there's no magic words for this, so I'm just kind of pulling this out of the air right now. Like kind of doing things for show versus doing things for yourself, as you've talked about. And a lot of people describe, and I've experienced it as well. It's like I'll use myself as an example for a moment. I started down a journey of doing some things and so forth. And it's like at first I was doing them always looking around to see if people were paying attention and what their reactions were, even though it was the thing that I wanted to do. And what shifted for me was when I realized, and the little voice inside said, go do it and quit worrying about what other people see. Like the outcome isn't their reaction. The outcome is your enjoyment. And what's interesting is when I would do a thing and look around to see how people were reacting, they weren't reacting. But when I just did the thing and stopped worrying about people's reactions is when I got the most comments. And exactly what you said, it inspires people. It's almost like they kind of, it truly is the act of doing it selfishly. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, that gets people's attention, because I think everybody ultimately wants to be able to have that freedom to do the thing purely for themselves. I'm going to stop. But that's kind of what I'm taking from what you're sharing is, it's not always about doing different things, although it very much can be. And it's always also not about the reaction that you get in the social media world that we live in, where it's all about the likes. The most profound things I'm hearing and taking from your story is that the things that you do purely for yourself and in the absence of needing somebody else's approval, comment, like, share, or follow.
Yeah. And it's hard to do the thing that nobody else is doing. It's hard to do the things that you want to do, but you're afraid to do them. But if there's a want or curiosity to do something, that is something that's going to build character development. That is something that's going to bring you closer to getting to know you for you and that level of joy that you want. Like another big example for me would be opening up my own business. Everybody was against it. It was just like, what are you thinking? Like, well, how are you going to give up this full-time job with job security, with retirement, with all of these like safety nets for something that you don't know if you're going to succeed? Nobody else has succeeded around you. What makes you special? What makes you different? And I'm just like, nothing. It's just the will to try.
Yeah.
It was just like, I'm willing. I trust myself so much. I've known myself so much that I know I can do it. I just have to try. And worst case scenario, I fail. I go back to the old routine. It's not going to be the end of the world. I'm not going to die.
It's interesting because you're still the same Jaime in the family who's doing things differently. You're still the same Jaime in the family who's kind of going out in a different direction. But this time it's a little bit scarier for some other folks, right?
Yeah, because I'm not doing the things that they're expecting me to do. Like they wanted me to become a doctor, which I still did, but not the version of doctor that they wanted. They wanted me to become a medical doctor doing surgeries and whatnot. The reason I decided to do a doctor is because I did my bachelor's. There's this common saying that you do your bachelor's for your family, you do your master's for your job, and you do your doctorates for yourself.
Interesting.
And I completely agree with that, because the reason I even decided to do my doctorate is because of that accident. I learned why is it that people underappreciate their staff and let them go so easily. So I studied employee retention, burnout, stress, and how that affects you in the workplace. And that's what ended up inspiring me to open up my business, because there was so much research on it, but there's so much research that was still missing from it. And a lot of these strategies that are evidence-based are not being utilized in the workforce. We see that it works. Stats show us that if we treat employees better, they're going to stay there longer. It's not only about the pay. Yes, you should give them a pay that they can thrive and live in, but also treat them like human beings. So that inspired me to open up my business and doing all this stuff. But that scared everybody shitless because they're like, yay you for trying to go above and beyond. But like, that's insane. Like, how can you go against the grain? Like, and it's just like, because I'm doing things for me. If I was still old Jaime, I would have just stuck it, with my job being unsatisfied. I can be very successful in any job I want. And I think that's where the audacious part of me comes in. I know I have the ability to succeed in any position because I can learn it, master it, be good at it, and do what I'm told. Doesn't mean I'm going to be happy.
Was this element of I know I can succeed there before the accident, more so after the? I'm just curious. Was that always there? And was that always here? Let me frame the question. Was that kind of confidence in your ability to do things always there? And if so or not, how did the accident influence that?
So there was always a part of me that knew I was a little bit different, not knowing the ADHD. And people think that ADHD is a bad thing, but for me, it's my little superpower.
Mm-hmm. I hear that a lot from people who share that, actually.
Yeah. And it's like being neurodivergent was the worst and best things that could have happened to me. Worse because I didn't know that I had it. And if I would have known like the good things and the drawbacks from it, I could have learned to adapt to it a lot sooner and made my life so much better. But the best, because once I learned that I had it and I learned how my brain functioned, then I was able to work with it, to manage it, to use it for my advantage. But I was able to learn things very quickly. However, I didn't know how to apply them right away because I would get bored and then just like switch. So it would make my bosses frustrated. It would make me frustrated because I would get one task really fast and they wanted me to replicate that, but my brain no longer had interest in that task. They wanted to switch. So when they wanted me to replicate that same speed at every single time, I got slower because I was no longer interested. So then it became boring and my brain was not giving me that dopamine rush every time. So that made me like a little insecure when I was younger, had the imposter syndrome kind of kick in. After the accident, and I really started learning about myself, that's when made me curious about why there's certain things I did that other people didn't find normal. So that's when I got assessed and I learned about, my diagnosis and whatnot. And from there, knowing all of these insecurities that fed into the imposter syndrome, I was like, oh, it's not that I'm lazy. It's not that I'm stupid. It's not that, I don't get things. It's just more so I function differently. So I need to change the way I tackle things. And once I started learning those pieces of myself, and this can apply with anybody, even people who do not have ADHD or who have another diagnosis, knowing your strengths, like really knowing your strengths and really knowing your weaknesses will really help you accomplish anything you want in life. Because you can then have that perspective and whatever goal you have and make a customizable plan for success. The reason most people fail when they set a goal is because they go blindsided, not knowing how they're going to accomplish that goal and not knowing how their body and their brain is going to react when the stress comes in. You're good when you're like at your physical peak, but once your stressors come in, you need to know how your body's going to react when you're weak. You need to know how your body's going to react when you're strong. So by knowing those qualities, that's how you'll know you'll make it. And you'll know whether that's really audacious. Like, for example, I knew I was going to be able to finish a marathon because of my training regime. Now, can I finish an ultra marathon, like a 200-mile one? Not right now. That's how I know, okay, that's a hard stop. Like, that's too much. My body is not strong enough to do that right now. That would be considered a weakness until I train it to do that. Do I want to do that? No. That's what I say now, but ask me again in 10 years.
But I'd love to, if I can interject though, but notice the difference though, from what many people might say is, oh no, I couldn't do that. Your response was, no, I can't do that yet, but I'm not sure I want to. Exactly. And it's the clarity, like you said, it's really knowing what you want, knowing what your abilities are without necessarily limiting them, through intention. I mean, that's really powerful.
And there's a thing too, is like, there's a difference between having a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And I think that's going to be a big determiner of your skill set. Because somebody with a fixed mindset, even if they get to know who they are, they'll say, this is my plateau. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. This is it. So I'm always going to stay in this pigeonholed location with my job, with my skills, with this position, with my relationship, because that's all I'm ever going to be good for. Versus a growth mindset, you'll tell yourself, cool, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. What can I do to improve them? What can I do to break that ceiling that I set within myself, that wall that I set within myself, to take it to one step ahead and then reach the goals that I want to do?
This is actually a great point to kind of slide into the remaining three questions. It's a great setup for the next question, because question three is, what have you learned about yourself as a result of sitting on this comma?
It's been a lot of things, really. One is that your mindset has a lot to do with how you tackle things in life. And I think back in the day, I did have more of a fixed mindset, thinking that everything had to be based on the expectations that were set on me. And that was the cap of my ability. But now that I'm over here thinking I can influence things internally and externally, and I have more control over my life than I think I do, I think that's what really led to the growth mindset and led me to have that confidence that you mentioned. I can do anything I want to. And that's the key word. I can do anything that I want to, you know? And that's the thing, because some people think that, wow, that person's so cocky, they think they can do anything in the world. No, I think I can do anything that I set my mind to. Because it's born from something that I wish and desire to do based on the abilities I know I have and I could have if I put my mind to it.
And you're giving credit to this kind of idea that you've been sharing all along about self exploration and really looking at yourself, because a lot of people will say, oh, I want to do that thing, but unless they're working with a coach or a therapist or somebody who actually asks the question, we often don't ask ourselves, why do we want the thing? And really crack open the whole, do I want that thing because it's something I want for me? And if so, what will it bring me? Versus well, I want the thing because that's what everybody else is doing. Well, it's like, well, do you really want the thing though? Right?
Exactly. And I do have to premise that I didn't do this alone. I had a good support of friends that helped me through it. I have therapists, I've had life coaches, I've had mentors that kind of helped me through these times. And you can do some of these alone, but just because you can do something alone doesn't mean you should. Why, if the resources are there, is not going to make you any stronger. It's not going to make you any less of a person, of a human being, by asking for help. If you have the resources, do it. It's a common phrase and everybody hears it all the time. Work smarter, not harder. You're not proving yourself anything by going against the grain and not using any resources.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up. And especially, I mean, I'm sure it also has to do with the fact that you're a career coach. So you hear that all the time. And it's usually used in the organizational setting, right? Like somebody quit, we're not going to backfill that position. Now you got to do two people's work smarter, not harder. And it's usually used, as an extraction method, as opposed to when you're using it with yourself, what type of possibility can it create? And, or how can you make things easier for yourself rather than harder by leaning on your resources? I so appreciate you making that statement. And I'm just going to say it right now. That may end up being the soundbite for the social media clips right there. But anyway, Jaime, let me ask the fourth question, and you can kind of go back and forth however you want to. What has changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma? I feel like you've kind of already answered that question, but what would you add to that?
I think I finally learned after this comma that I matter. And in order for me to have a sustainable, happy life, I had to do things that I loved. And that had to start by loving myself and understanding what causes me to be happy, what causes me to have stress, like all of these different things. And really getting to spend some time with me. I think a lot of us feel uncomfortable being alone. And I think it's because as a society, we've learned that, happiness comes from being in groups and being in a couple and all of these things. But happiness really does it has to start from you. You just need to start loving yourself.
What does spending time alone look like for you? In what ways do you really lean into and celebrate and spend that time?
Yeah. So not to keep using the same analogy, but I go on runs by myself. I go to the gym by myself. I'll literally take myself out to the movies. I will have dinner at a fancy restaurant, dress up, just go out on my own. I've done road trips on my own. I've traveled to different countries on my own. And then just everything that I like want to do, I don't put an excuse of I would do this, but I wish somebody would have gone with me. I'm like, no, I'm gonna do this because I want to, and I'm gonna make it happen. Yeah. So like, yeah, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say I'm really curious because I'm self-referencing here because I relate to this very, very deeply. I'm curious. I want to test your reaction with something. For me, don't know if that's true for you. You're going to share us. I like to do those things alone. It doesn't mean I can't do all of those things with other people. But when I do them alone, I'm able to absorb the experience a whole lot more. Some things I do enjoy doing with other people, but like travel in particular, as an explorer who likes to take in all the things around me, it's difficult to do that with other people because it kind of like blocks my radar a little bit. So I share that. I'm curious, like, what is it that you gain by doing these things alone that's different from when you do them with other people?
So one of the things I know about myself is I love to please other people. I'm a people pleaser. So I try not to, and I'm still learning and I'm growing, but I will typically, especially like if I'm traveling, doing an activity, try to do what's best for the groups to cause the least amount of strife so that we have a good time. So, the bigger the group, the more likely somebody's not going to like something you do. So unless you agree to split off and do anything that you want on your own and then meet back together, which usually people don't want to do because that's the whole point of being in a group. They want to do things together. Then I typically will not do things that I want to do. So versus if I was going on my own, I have my own agenda and I'll have two modes. I'll have the mode, well, I'll plan an itinerary to the T and I'll go bam, 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 bam. Or I'll sometimes travel and I was like, I'm emotionally fatigued. I don't have the brain power to do anything. So wherever the day takes me, that's what I'm going to do today. And I'll just explore. And I'll have a mixture of both when I vacation, when I go traveling. Like, for example, I did a road trip across the United States for 7 days. And my goal was to go to 7 states in 7 days. Had no plan what to do. I said, today we're going to go to Vegas, like to Nevada. So then I drove and like I was looking at like places, looking at the signs. Oh, that looks fun. I stopped, did that, things like that. However, when I went to Utah, there was very specific things I wanted to do in Utah. So then I did hit those spots. Then I went to another state again, whatever happens, so that would have not flied very well if I was with my family or with my friends. They would have given them so much anxiety, or they're like, oh, that's boring. I don't want to do that. And I love taking pictures. And one of the biggest things, like I like to take very unique pictures in unique places. So like if there's like something historic, then I'll do that. Or if there's something like that is just like off the cuff, like where it's just like, oh, that's weird. Like there's this thing around the United States. There's like the swing into the abyss where they're on top of a cliff. And this is a swing that like you can see the ocean or like a large mass of things. Beautiful landscape. And there's 7 swings all over the United States. And they're like very picturesque things, but it's like a hike to get to each one. Like one of them took me like, I literally almost died getting up there, because it was just a very steep and it was like a very small ledge, but I did it, took a picture, and then I went back. It was like a 3-hour thing just to take like a 30-second picture and then come back.
Yeah.
Nobody would have done that with me,
I'm hearing this theme of freedom though, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you're nodding. People won't be able to see you, but I mean, you're nodding very, very energetically there, enthusiastically. Okay.
It's having autonomy over your life.
Yeah. Jaime, let's go to the last question here. And that is, what does getting off the comma look like for you?
It's one of the hardest things because after you make like this revelation that, wow, something needs to change, my life is no longer what it used to be, or if not, it'll be a version of it, but not really. It's doing the work to really get to know yourself, get to know this new version of you, or like the things that you need to do to become a new version of you, because what's going on is you can't just sustain that anymore. So it is, you just got into water and it's all murky. So you have to kind of like wait and do things to like let the mud settle down so you can see the clarity again. And some of that is patience. It's being persistent, being very trusting the process, I guess is like the easiest way to say. Because what you're doing today, you're not going to see the results today. You have to be able to do it every single day, even if it's a baby step towards the goal that you want to achieve so that you can get off that comma and live the next section of your life. And also remember that this is not the only comma you're going to have. But the next one will get significantly easier because you got through this one and you have the experience to get through it again.
Which kind of also highlights, I mean, you said patience, trust. I'm also hearing perseverance, determination. Yeah, that can be one of the hardest lessons to learn, right? Is really having a long view and doing things like investing isn't just for money, right? It's for habits. It's all the things. So I appreciate you sharing that for sure. Jaime, thank you. Obviously, we could talk so much more, and that's the thing about these episodes, right? There's never enough time to get into all the things, and there's so many side roads we could have gone down based on what you've shared with us so far. But given that, where could people find you? Because obviously, we're going to put your links in the show notes. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, maybe connect, learn more about what you're doing, follow your journey, tell us, where could people locate you?
Pretty simple. You can go on my website or find me on social media. Both are the same. Rainbow Career Coaching. All my tags are the same. So I'm pretty much on any social media you can think of out there. So if you search it, most likely I'm there. If not, just go on my website and then just shoot me an email or a social media DM.
Okay, awesome. And we'll have that in the show notes. I encourage everybody to go and click on the links there. And like me, you have Linktree. So like that one is the keeper of all the other ones, right? So some folks out there still don't know what that is. So last part before we close things up is obviously, this podcast is all about sharing people's stories, learning through storytelling. We're not here to give advice or be experts. It's like just sharing our experiences and let people kind of pull what they want. So it's about lifting up, voices of everyday folks like ourselves. We couldn't complete your story without giving you an opportunity to do the same thing for folks in your circle who matter to you. So I call this section acknowledgements. And basically, it's your opportunity to give a voice to, boost, lift up anybody else in your circle that you want to kind of give a little extra publicity to. That could be causes, organizations, it could be other creators, people in your family, businesses you frequent, whatever the case may be. So who would you like to acknowledge today?
Two main, one is an organization, one is a really close friend that has got me through this. So she's actually the person that inspired me to start up my business and has been my biggest cheerleader and mentor, I would say, in this whole process. Her name is Maria Espinoza. Mendoza, actually changed her last name when she got married. Mendoza. She's known as Luscious Beauties Cosmetics, has her own cosmetic line, and she has been fantastic in just mentoring me, giving me that audacious feeling that you can do this. Like when everybody was telling me you can't open up your business, she's like, why not? Why can't you? You should. So she's been amazing. And the second one is something I actually didn't mention today, but something I do incorporate into my business is laughter yoga. And that's helped me tremendously just to maintain a positive, bubbly attitude, because it reminded me that I can bring joy back into my life in any moment. So the Laughter Yoga International is like a fantastic organization where they have for free laughter yoga sessions for one, just to learn how to laugh again. And that's something that I truly, truly admire and has a big change in my life.
Since you bring it up here, and since you mentioned that you didn't share it in your story, is there any particular kind of brief or poignant story that you like to share that kind of brings that into your story again?
Yeah, I will try to give the Cliff Notes version, and that's aging myself. But yeah, like the summary of it. The way I got introduced to laughter yoga was at my old job before I started my business, we had this company conference that we went to, and we were not at the best moods with each other. There was a lot of like conflict, and we went to this laughter yoga session, not knowing what the heck we were getting ourselves into. The instructor noticed that we were upset, and she let us know. She's like, after the session, if you're mad, I promise you probably won't be mad anymore, and you'll forget what you're mad about. So I know let's pretend that y'all are friends, and we'll just do the activities, and we'll go from there. And once we started doing the laughter exercises and the silliness, and it's amazing how just playing and having that inner child come out again was able to like release all the tension that we had with each other. It really simplified the issues we had with each other. And we're like, you know what? It's really not that serious. It was to the point where we were hugging and crying and laughing at the same time, just because it was so cathartic. And we ended up like, forgiving each other at the end of it. And we talked it over and apologized. And I was so inspired that I became friends with the instructor. She actually certified me as a laughter yoga leader. And I actually just finished my laughter yoga teacher to certify new people as well. It's just been a good experience.
Oh, very cool. Well, I'm glad it came up then, right? So, and it really just kind of brings us full arc back to the beginning, when you talk about how you describe yourself and bubbly being one of those words. And so I love it. Jaime, thank you for sharing your story with us today and for being open and transparent with everything that you shared. So much to take away from what you've experienced, and just very appreciative of you being here and giving us the insights from your experience.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. You're doing amazing work, and keep on sharing people's stories, like truly inspiring.
Thank you. Yes, it's definitely a calling for me, and it's definitely something that I feel a lot of passion about. So I'm looking forward to continuing. So, and we will check in with you again in the future for sure. And in the meantime, have yourself a wonderful week.
You too. Thank you.
What an honor it is for me to witness these powerful stories. I hope you feel the same way too. Think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. Surprises can reveal themselves to you when you do this. And if you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. Let's spread the word. Let's continue to build connection. And if you do discover something you'd like to unpack further, book a call with me and let's talk about it. My links are in the show notes. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast here on this platform and social media at Off the Comma. And feel free to comment and interact with these posts and episodes. Check out my website for workshops, events, and my sponsor community. I'm covering the costs of production by curating my own sponsors who align with our vision. Be sure to check them out. They're all powerful people and businesses. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. As always, keep noticing and keep listening.